and welcome to another episode of The Open Effect. I'm Jenna,
And I'm Rubina.
and today we have a very, very special guest. As some of you may know, I have a personal passion for the issue that is facing this world that no one really talks about, and that is human trafficking, especially children sex trafficking. So I'd like to give a warm welcome to Paul from Destiny Rescues. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me in the studio. It's incredible to be here with you both.
Just fill us in on what Destiny Rescue is and how you all got started with it.
Yeah, look, Destiny Rescue, we're an international charity seeking to rescue children from child sexual exploitation and human trafficking all around the world, and then making sure they get to stay free. We were founded on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland back in 2001, and our founder, Tony Kerwin, who still is involved in the organisation and lives up in Thailand, rescuing kids on a weekly basis. Tony was in Thailand with some friends and was in a bar and overheard two guys talk about what they could do with a girl for a couple of $100. And Tony went, "That is so wrong, and someone needs to do something about it." And like a lot of organisations, a lot of founders, I guess, he heard that small little voice that went, "Well, you're someone, go and do something about this issue." And so 23 years later, we've now rescued over 15,000 people. We currently work in 5 regions around the world. So we're working in countries like Thailand, Philippines, Cambodia. We're in Nepal, in Kenya, Uganda, Zimbabwe. We've got work in the Dominican Republic, and there's a number of other countries that we're working in which we don't talk about publicly just for security reasons. And, predominantly rescuing children that have been trafficked into the sex trade and then helping them stay free.
Yes, because it's not just about rescuing, it's also the aftercare as well,
Absolutely.
helping them deal with the trauma that they have faced.
Yeah.
So how did he really, this is a, perfect example of one person saying, I can make a difference. And really that's 23 years now of making a difference year in, year out. How did he go about setting it up and kind of bringing the whole team together?
Yeah, look, I think in those early years of Destiny Rescue, it was a lot of, trial and error, a lot of things about working out, well, how do we get kids out? How do we find them, for a start? And then what do you do once you found them and how do we get them out? And the organisation's come, I guess, a long way, in that history. Today, we really work hand in hand with law enforcement in most of the countries that we work in. We've got lots of memorandum of understandings with different law enforcement agencies that are specifically targeted to rescue children from human trafficking. And we basically work with those law enforcement agencies to go and find where kids are being exploited. We help them gather evidence. And then once we've got that evidence to go and run a raid, is what we do in a lot of the countries we work in, we basically will fund law enforcement to go and do that raid. And I was up in Thailand 2 weeks ago, and we were talking to the Royal Thai Police about some of what they're doing, and they basically get funding, in a sense for their vehicles. They can generally drive about an hour, but then if they've got to go further than that, the police have to pay for that transportation themselves because their budget doesn't allow them to go further. And so one of the things we do at Destiny Rescue is help fund the police to do those raids. I was on a raid about 10 days ago in the Philippines, and we were providing, Destiny Rescue was providing the meals for the police. We were providing all the minibus transfers because on that particular day we rescued 20 girls, and we needed to provide the transportation to get them back to the police station, and then an aftercare shelter. We had to provide for that first 36 hours of accommodation for the girls, their foods. We had to provide for the the social workers that came in to do the counselling and the health checks and all that sort of thing. And so we really work hand in hand with law enforcement and social workers to, get the kids out of the situation that they're in, get all the undercover surveillance and things done, get the right evidence packaged up so that it can stand up in a court case, and then, work with the aftercare needs of those kids to make sure that they get to live out their destiny that they were born with.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. You guys are doing so much. When I'm thinking about, you working with law enforcement and going into these raids and rescuing people. What have you seen in terms of like the demographic of people you're rescuing from these raids?
Most, I would say, in more than half of our raids, the girls that we're rescuing would sit between the ages of 14 and 18. We definitely, we do rescue those over the age of 18. So this raid that I was part of 10 days ago up in the Philippines, there were 7 minors, and the other 13 of those 2 raids were aged 18 to 22. And so, if we go in and we're doing a raid and there's women that have been trafficked that are over the age of 18, we will still, help them get on that pathway to freedom. If they want to return to the sex trade, they're more than welcome to do that because they're adults and they can make that decision. But most of them, it's very rare that they actually want to go back into that work. But then the youngest that we've ever rescued were 2 8-month-old twins.
Wow.
And so although the majority of our rescues are 14 to 18, we are seeing younger and younger children that are being exploited, and particularly the online exploitation of children. We are seeing a much younger demographic of kids being exploited online because you've often, got a family member that is exploiting the kids in the family.
That's shocking. That's really shocking.
Even just a family member. Do you often find out how they were trafficked once you've rescued them?
Yeah, we generally in that, as the social workers come through and help them work through their story and work through that, the healing journey that they go on, our social workers will generally hear a lot of those stories. But the reasons for people being trafficked are so varied. It's not like there is one story. You've got, sometimes you've got kids that are being trafficked because the parents have trafficked them. And often what we will find, if the mum's been involved in trafficking that child, generally the mum's been exploited in her past as well. So it's a generational effect. You then got other, people that have applied for a job and they thought that they were getting a legitimate job. We're doing a lot in the scamming centres in Cambodia at the moment, rescuing a lot of people out of those scamming centres, and you tend to find that someone's seen a job advertised on Facebook, they've clicked the link, they've gone through an interview process, it's been rigorous, and they then cross the border from Thailand into Cambodia, end up at this place thinking that they're going to be working in a casino or in a call center or something like that, and then once they get there, their passport's taken off of them, and then they're abused, they're manipulated, and they ended up actually being on the end of the phones. When we get the scam phone calls in Australia, we actually find a lot of these people have been trafficked into those situations. You've got other people that are selling themselves for sex just to put food on the table. I met last year a young girl in Zimbabwe who was going out to sell herself in the slum for 25 cents.
Are you serious?
Just to put food on the table, because she was a 14-year-old girl bringing up her younger brothers and sisters because her parents had died, and for her to put food on the table just for one meal a day, she was selling herself for sex. So the reasons people are trafficked are really varied. And a story I often hear actually in Nepal. So we run a lot of border station posts on the Nepal border. And our staff, which is an army of Nepalese women, have the authority to intercept people that are crossing the border from Nepal into a neighbouring country. And these women get to interview these kids and say, why are you crossing the border today? What are you doing? And often we will find it's other women trafficking these girls. And a story that I hear a lot is, a 12-year-old girl on the way to school of a morning, and a lady comes along and says, hey, if you come with me today, I can take you across the border to the large city that's across the border. I'll buy you a new sari. We can get lunch. It's a bit of a fun outing today. And you can be back home by the time school finishes and nobody needs to know. And these young 12-year-old girls go, wow, this sounds like a bit of a fun day. And before they know it, they're in, a red light district and being abused. And thankfully we're able to we're rescuing a lot of kids on that Nepal border that think they're going for a fun, exciting excursion from some stranger that comes along.
That was actually one of the facts that I actually found quite shocking, that most traffickers are women. How do you think they get into the industry? Do you think they've been trafficked themselves and then they've fallen into it, or it could be just pure greed, really?
Yeah, I don't know whether I would say necessarily most traffickers are women, but there is a large proportion of women trafficking children. And again, I think the reasons are very diverse. Sometimes you've had, and I think it's whether it's men or women that are the traffickers. I think it's probably a myth that I think sometimes need dispelling, because we can sometimes go, well, women are just the victim, but sometimes men are also the victim. And the fact that you've maybe been trafficked, that doesn't justify your trafficking of children. And so I think humanity is broken. And whether you're male or female, trafficking kids, it's wrong. And so I think we've got to, sometimes our society wants to kind of go, oh, well, they were a victim, so that's the reason we can justify that thing. But to be honest, people traffic people for their own personal gain. Generally, the trafficker is earning more money than the child being trafficked, that you get paid. And so, sometimes you've got people, whether it's male or female, trafficking kids for their own financial benefit and your own financial gain, and you think that this is the way that you can break the poverty cycle in your own life. And then there's power imbalance. Sometimes people are trafficking kids because you get this power trip. You feel like, well, I'm going to leverage you, you as an inferior person or a smaller person or a younger person or someone that I've got control and power over. You're being exploited. That's exploitation.
Well, the first kind of real vision that I had of it was when I recently saw The Sound of Freedom last year in the cinema. And it was actually a wake-up call, because I didn't think this was an issue that we face today in our, modern world. But in that movie, there was a female trafficker. She was the face of it. And to watch, as a female, as we would perceive as more nurturing, have these evil tendencies for financial gain, it was quite shocking. And that was really the turning point for me, to see that this is happening, this is a real thing, and made me wake up and be like, what can I do? And now every time I have that conversation with people, a lot of people don't even know about this issue. But
and Sound of Freedom was fantastic to shine a light on an issue. The stats would show that there's over 1 million children sold into the sex trade every year. It's an industry that generates more than $99 billion a year. And the thing about children that are trafficked, a child can be sold multiple times a day. If you're in the arms trade or in the drug trade, drugs and bullets can be sold once, or can be used once. But children can be used many times a day. And so, we really appreciated what Sound of Freedom did to raise awareness of this issue and get people thinking more about the topic. And, because it's actually a massive problem in Australia. Australia is really unfortunate to hold the worst gold medal possible. We've won the gold medal in Thailand for the most number of foreigners prosecuted for sex offences.
Really?
In the Philippines, we've got the worst bronze medal that you ever want to own, and that is that we come third as a nation of people buying online child sexual exploitation. And people often go, well, this isn't this is a problem that happens overseas. Actually, Australia is, we're medal holders, and it's the worst.
The demand,
We're the demand.
It's crazy because even what Jenna said before, how she had to watch a movie to discover that this world exists. In the same way, I actually met someone who worked in they construct themselves as they work in the sex industry.
Mm.
And they actually wrote a book about their experience, and it's all based here in Adelaide. I read it, and I was really shocked to know that even in our next door neighbors, like we have people who have been trafficked, and they're engaging in things. They're engaging in activities where it's legal here, and they are casted under massage, like a massage place, but in reality, it's a brothel. And she shared her journey and said what she's witnessing in there, and said that there was a lot of international people, like from Japan, from Thailand, and these are young girls. They don't even speak English. So someone drops them there, and then they have to work. They can't leave until they come back and pick them up.
Yeah.
And they don't even understand what, the receptionist or what their guests that come in. I say guests, you know what I mean. But they don't even understand the language, but they're in these rooms. They're being treated however, God knows what happens in there. But she shared that, and to me, I broke down, and I'm thinking, there's so many international students, and what's the extent that they're being exploited, and they're walking past us, and we do not know that.
Yeah, they can't even tell us. They don't know how to tell us because we don't speak the same language. Do you often find that Destiny Rescue deal with any issues in Australia?
Yeah, we don't. We're not authorised by the government to deal with kids that are trafficked in Australia. I guess our work is really focused on what happens overseas, but it is a problem in Australia. And I think what you've just talked about, people that come in on student visas, there is often manipulation and coercion, and you have to come and work in this place. There is that manipulation and coercion will be, from, their trafficker or their pimp or whatever they're called. We'll be saying, well, if you tell people I've got videos of you that I'll share online. So there's cases of sextortion in that place. And then I was at an event last year, and one of the people who's a supporter of Destiny Rescue was at an event, but they're a social worker and working in youth social work, and he was telling me of a client that he has, and this is probably more common in Australia than what we think, kids that have fallen through the child protection gaps. So they've maybe, and they're couch surfing. So they're now trying to find a place to live. And he was telling me that this young girl that he was one of his clients, and said that she was told by a guy, you can come and live with me free of charge. You don't have to pay rent, but this is how you're going to pay me.
Right.
And was being exploited in that way. So that does happen in Australia. It's probably on a very different scale to how it happens overseas. But it is an issue for us in Australia. People, sex is seen as a form of payment. And so people that are vulnerable in any parts of the world that are vulnerable, sex is used often as leverage and manipulation and coercion. The whole sextortion space is a real threat for our young people today of people, and I keep having conversations. I've got two teenage boys, and we keep having regular conversations about them about not sending nudes and things, because you know what? That can be used against you. You send a nude to someone else, and you might even think they're just a friend, but then all of a sudden that photo is used against you. And it's one of the messages I want to keep getting out to people in our country is please don't send a nude to anyone, even your boyfriend or your girlfriend. You think it's safe, but then what happens when your relationship breaks up? And, then suddenly someone's got those photos of you, even if you think it's just a joke. That can be held over you for the rest of your life, that someone's got a photo of you that they can send to your future employer, they can send to your future partner, they can stick it on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, and it only takes a couple of hours for it to go viral before the technology giants then pull it down, but
It's
someone can
always
then
there.
take it, and you've
Yeah.
suddenly got incriminating evidence against
And
yourself.
even with Snapchat, which was meant for this, it was meant to be called peekaboo.
Yeah.
Even on Snapchat, when it disappears, I know of boys who have their friend taking a photo of that photo. So even though you think it's safe, it's not going to be safe.
No,
It's not.
just don't do it. It just saves yourself a world of in the moment when it's all exciting and it's a bit risque and you're like, this is a bit of fun. Just I've seen too many people ruin their lives and then deal with the consequences of that one
little mistake.
One little mistake that you've made.
Yeah. It's the more I'm thinking about Snapchat and technology, I'm being drawn back to how you said you're actually seeing an increase in younger people being trafficked. Do you think it's because of the increase in technology and
100%?
Yeah.
And what we're seeing, particularly in countries like Thailand, Philippines, and whatnot, and I want to be careful kind of where I go with this because I kind of don't want to give people insight into how to find that material. But unfortunately, the more technology advances and the more technology enables us to, for good reasons, technology enables, translation apps to translate. We're seeing a real rise of more and more kids being exploited in countries that don't speak English as a first language because of technology. Now, 2 weeks ago I was in Thailand and I was sitting in the restaurant at our hotel having lunch one day and a guy, and I don't know whether he was an Aussie, but he was a Western guy, would have been in his late 40s, early 50s, I would suspect. And he walked in with a young boy who would have been a late teenager. And they sat across the table from each other, sending each other messages, text messages, and they were communicating, obviously using a translation app. And, with every good bit of technology, there's a dark side of that technology as well.
Yeah, that's true.
And it was really clear what was happening from this older guy and this young boy. The young boy kept going and was taking selfies and stuff, so obviously saw himself as a bit of an influencer. And for us in Australia, it was just a standard kind of hotel that we're staying in, but probably for him, on Thai standards, he was in a real flash place, and he's taking lots of selfies and getting, and I would say he was definitely being paid for being there, but the technology was enabling the communication to happen because of translation apps.
And it's very glamorized now with the birth of social media. Everyone has this amazing lifestyle that they're portraying, but what they do to actually get to that lifestyle or even exposing themselves, like I think we're so desensitized because you open your phone and there's half naked people everywhere. So it's like, how can you tell what is wrong and right when you're just constantly seeing it everywhere?
And we often see that when we go undercover into the bars and karaoke bars and whatnot to do our investigative work and identify where kids are being trafficked. You'll often, you'll have the girls that are up on the stage or that are doing their performances to get customers. And they're all happy and smiling, and you think, oh, wow, they're having so much fun and they're living their best life. And then you see the change in their face and their persona as they hop off the stage and they're in the background. And, often you might see them just be, back of stage on side, and they're horrible. They look horrible. They look sad. They look lonely. They're destitute. They're broken. And then when you have the conversations with them and you look into their eyes, there's no life in their eyes. Their eyes are hollow. Their eyes are, there is desperation. There is brokenness. And you start to realize is that the face that they put on when they're up on the stage is just an act. And I often think, what parent ever has a child and dreams of the day their little girl is working in one of the world's largest sex districts.
Yeah. Well, that's what I can't understand. How you mentioned before, like it's the parents who are doing like some proportion of parents selling their kids or hoping. It's I just How could you give birth to your child and then think, all right, this is going to be my way out? Or I just can't understand it.
It's very shocking because you come to think about it and there's a lot of empathy, because like you said earlier, these are vulnerable people who have been targeted for whatever reason. And I'm trying to think, for example, a parent, what drove you to that length of wanting to exploit your child? Is it the issues of, poverty? Is it the issues of, someone else is forcing you to do that? To what extent have you been that broken to be able to do that? So,
and look, I think the reasons are many and varied. Again, some of it is purely you found a way to provide for your kids. Sometimes you're in debt bondage, so sometimes you've taken out a loan from a loan shark, and you've got a 20 or 30%, 40% interest payment that you've got to make. And you've got to find some way to pay that loan shark back. People, coming in and threatening you and threatening to kill you, threatening to kill your child. And poverty drives people to do things that a normal person wouldn't. Sometimes it is purely exploitation. It's evil and greed. And then I think for a lot of parents that sell their kids, they start justifying it. Well, I got to buy my kid a new shirt. Or I got to buy her a little bike, or suddenly, we got to buy a new TV. We got to buy a new phone. We often, often see people when we're doing some of our undercover work, and it's like, if you, actually, I'm not going to go there. Let's just cut that. What I was going to say was probably a bit too operational, so let me pull back from that bit. Yeah. But yeah, like there are many reasons why a parent might end up trafficking their child, and
do you think with poverty, let's say in a perfect world, poverty is demolished, we're all at a middle class stage, do you think this would still be an issue?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah. Sorry, I just thought of it. It's like
I think it while there is brokenness in our society and there are power imbalances and people choose to manipulate people, unfortunately in our society there are always going to be narcissists. There's always going to be people gaslighting people. But our society, as our society becomes more broken and more fractured and people realize they can manipulate other people, I think we are still going to unfortunately see that happen. But in a society that is healthy and whole and where, good, and this might sound really old-fashioned, but I think it's true, good family values exist and people are seen as valuable and precious, that there is less exploitation that happens. And so I think poverty certainly forces people to do things that they wouldn't normally do. But when people live in a way that they're loved and cared for and valued and supported, you see less exploitation happening.
I agree. Also, going back to Jenna's question, I definitely agree with you in a sense where even though we had that middle class and everything was good, we hear a lot, I know, in the media about celebrity being trafficked as well. There's a lot going on with, we've got the online, like OnlyFans, people making choices and decisions to go into
trafficking themselves, really.
So I think, like you said, if we fix all these power imbalances, if we also do the inner work to discover what our traumas are and because I think a lot of people operate on traumas. You know, maybe someone exploited them, violated them when they were younger, and they grow up not knowing that the way they're acting, it's coming out of this unresolved trauma. You know, so I think a lot of that as a society, if we can really help people deal with that, you know, those traumatic experiences they've experienced, and creating a space for them to come forth and, you know, say that I struggle with porn addiction. How can I get helped?
Yeah.
Because then it does come down to the demand. The unfortunate part is that although it's an awful like industry, people are buying into it, and that's what's fueling it.
Yeah.
If no one wanted this service, then it wouldn't be what 1 million children a year have you mentioned. So I think maybe it's coming down to fixing the problem with the consumers as well.
Yeah. 100%.
And
So
then,
true.
yeah. Do you ever go to schools and educate young children? Or, I mean, you said Australia is number one in Thailand. Is there some sort of campaign that you guys have been running for that?
Yeah, we have had, we do, you know, some of our team do go into schools from time to time and do education seminars and awareness seminars. And yeah, it's one of the things that we need to do in Australia is we need to educate our whole society. One of the things that, you know, we've been talking to the federal government about for the last couple of years is Australia hasn't run an education campaign aimed at outbound tourism going overseas for over 10 years.
Wow.
And we've been asking the federal government to fund a campaign that would help bring some education to say to people, when you're going, you know, to Southeast Asia and you think it's a little bit of harmless fun to go to one of the ping pong shows, to actually realise that sometimes when you go into those places, you're actually facilitating the trafficking of children. That in some of those places they will have children working there. They may not be front and centre, but to educate the Australian public that when you're going overseas on your end of year footy trip, or you know, how do we educate people in Oz to start questioning people that are travelling, and not just travelling, but about your, you know, even your online habits when you're sitting at home in your lounge room and you think no one's watching. How do we start having those conversations to go, you know, when you go into those bars overseas, are you aware that you could be exploiting children? And it's actually illegal for you to do that. So people often think, oh, what happens overseas stays overseas. But we've got laws in Australia now that say if you exploit kids overseas, you can be prosecuted for that here, even though it's happened overseas. And so we need people to realise that you are committing an offence and you can do jail time because of what you're doing overseas and that exploitation overseas.
Yeah, I think it's like the misconception that they think the women are one of age and then put themselves in that industry. They think it's all consensual, but a lot of people don't realise it's even a child. They might be all dolled up, and if they're in that late teen, then it can be quite hard to tell.
Yeah.
But
And just because a girl, you know, again, I spend a fair bit of time in Southeast Asia, and I'm in those areas that girls are being exploited, and you walk down the streets and all the girls are like, oh, hi, sexy man, and hey, handsome, and, you know, you never feel like you never feel so good, I suppose, you know, like you it's like, oh, wow, like I feel like, you know, they think I'm sexy. I'm like, no, they don't. It's just an act. Like they don't, they're just saying that because they're trying to make money.
Do they often have, do you know if they have quotas or?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's a money-making business. And so for them to stay working there in those jobs, it's all about how much money they're going to make. And they're forced to be doing things they don't, you know, if you have a think about it, if you're a dude and you're big and fat and no one here wants to sleep with you, well, no one overseas wants to sleep with you either. So don't, you know, but that's even for the guys that are ripped, you know, if you're a narcissist, if you are horrible to people, they're just trying to do what they're told they have to do.
Yes.
And yeah, it, yeah,
Yeah, it's almost like an act, really.
Yeah.
Like to see through it, that's not their true feelings. But I guess the flattery, people get obsessed with it. It's probably like an ego thing. Like, oh, this beautiful young woman wants me. You know, she's pursuing me.
Yeah.
So I'm not the bad person. But I think if you have to pay for it in any circumstance, you're a bit of a creep. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna say it. You're a bit of a creep. You need to reassess your life and.
And I think we've got to get to the point where we're game enough to have those conversations with those people in our lives that we get to influence and go, do you know that, like go on your end of year footy trips and have a phenomenal time. I've got no issue with that. But don't do it at other people's expenses.
Right.
Go and have a good night out, but respect the people that are there. Don't exploit someone. Go and, enjoy your life as much as you can. But don't do that at someone else's expense.
And like you talked about what federal government is doing in terms of this, are there any new laws to protect people being trafficked that are coming out or that have just come out recently or they've been in place for a while?
The government, the Australian government, is just in the middle of doing a review of the Modern Slavery Act, and we've made some submissions to some of those law reviews, and we are asking the federal government to change the definition of modern slavery because in Australia, our definition of modern slavery excludes child sexual exploitation.
Really?
Wow.
And the UK, the US, their definitions of modern slavery includes child sexual exploitation. But in Australia, we chose to exclude that when the Modern Slavery Act was introduced.
Do you know why?
I've got some suspicions as to why. I think there's some very powerful lobby groups in Australia that have lobbied for sexual exploitation to be excluded from our legislation.
Yeah.
And what we keep seeing is children are exploited, and we keep asking the federal government to strengthen our laws. Some of our laws around the criminal code are a little weak as it comes to the definitions of child sex trafficking and child sexual exploitation. And again, we keep asking for those laws to be strengthened. But then the government is doing some really good things to, tighten some of our, there's a law review we submitted to last year on cybercrime. And it's been really encouraging to engage with some different senators that are very supportive of the work that Destiny Rescue is doing and that want to make the world a safer place. We've got to put more pressure on social media companies. And, there's this very fine line that we walk around freedom of speech, but we need to make sure that, and I'm a big believer in freedom of speech, I think we need a society that is allowed to speak freely, but it shouldn't be at the expense of children and shouldn't be at the expense of the vulnerable. And we've got social media companies that have very much got the technology to stop various videos shared, phrases shared, words shared, and all that sort of thing. And if they wanted to, they could clean up the sharing of exploitation material.
Unfortunately, I think social media is trying to actually make it mainstream. There's a cute little thing that is tagged along with the gay community, which is MAP. So I don't know if you've heard of it.
No, I haven't heard of that.
Minor attracted people. So when people are posting about, love is love, it doesn't matter who you're in love with, that kind of gets put on the bottom of it. It's just kind of like slipped in. And I recently saw one where it was like, whether male, female, and then on the bottom it was MAP. So they didn't explain it. And then in the comments, someone said, oh, it's about minor attracted people. So now they're removing the word of pedophilia and trying to replace it with MAP.
Yes.
So it's a bit more, more common. Like, oh, so what? That's just who you love. And I think for me, I get really upset when people say that now. Like, I think it's been tarnished and people are taking it way too far. Like, and
100%.
even now they're trying to drop the legal consensual age, I think even to 12. They're trying to say that a 12-year-old can consent.
Mm.
Yeah.
But I
A
think
12-year-old can't consent.
no, I think if you can't drink, you can't smoke, you can't go off to war. How can you
Consent.
consent to something that is demeaning and change your life?
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't even want your 12-year-old having you know, those acts with another 12-year-old. You wouldn't
Yeah.
want them
No.
to, because they can't comprehend that
No.
certain thing.
Their brain is not ready for it. And I think that's unfortunately, I think, like I'd not heard of that terminology, the map thing, but we've seen that in some different stuff where, you know, people are starting to go, well, I can't help that I'm, you know, I was born a pedophile. So I'm, you know, so our society is starting to say, well, this should be normalized. This is, and it's not, it's wrong. And we don't tolerate that as a society, and we shouldn't tolerate it as a society. And we need social media giants to be playing their part alongside government to stop facilitating. We see time and time again a lot of kids overseas are being sold on Facebook Marketplace.
Wow.
Really?
And so you'll go to Facebook Marketplace and you'll see an ad there for, you know, for kids that you
And
can
they allow
access for
that.
massage services and whatever it might be. And you see
Wow.
girls pop up on menus on what's available on Facebook Messenger. And
what's the demographic of people you see when you encounter these ads?
Like the age group, the young.
Are they like young girls or older women?
generally, and look, you'll have the, you know, makeup can make girls look older or younger. So, and there'll be, you know, probably like you were just talking about, Jenna, different code words will mean different things. And so it's really varied.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's shocking on Facebook
I can't believe
Market.
Facebook.
And how come that's happening? You know, what is Facebook aware?
I think so.
Yeah.
Because Facebook's even loosened up some of their guidelines. Before, you couldn't have a female exposing herself. And recently I saw a fashion and I reported it. Because if I see anything I don't like, I report it. I'm one of those people. I think you should. And
Yeah, I
if
think you
more
should too.
people do it, then they would stand by it. But it actually didn't get taken down, even though she was completely exposed. And I'm like, young children look on Facebook. And I think that is a problem now. People as young as 2 are being exposed to this content, which I then think comes into culture. We need to start protecting the youth from social media, especially ones like Instagram and TikTok, where they don't remove things like this and they think it's normal. So then
Well, I'd say to the parents listening, can I ask you to be a parent to your child?
Right.
And being a parent means that you say no to your children because your children shouldn't be the decision makers about what they watch. You should be the decision makers about what they watch. And for my kids, I've got a 15-year-old. He still doesn't have social media accounts because I know what's out there. I see it way too much. And I know he gets annoyed at us, but then I've had the conversation with him to say, this is why we haven't let you have social media yet. Even at 15, he's potentially the only kid in his class that doesn't have it. But we have the conversation with him, mate, we're actually trying to protect you and we're trying to stop you from being exposed to things that you don't need to be exposed to. And I think as parents, we need to be saying to our kids, you can chuck whatever tantrum you want, but at the end of the day, I know when you're 25, you're going to thank me for it.
That's it.
And, you know, we expose our kids to way too much stuff that they just don't need to be exposed to. Issues and topics, you know, not even on this topic, but just, you know, we should be trying to protect our kids' innocence as long as they can, for them to grow up, because I want my kids to grow up thinking the world is a safe place, not that the world is a dangerous place, and that they don't need to be exposed to the news and to like there's elements of that, you know, obviously now as teenagers they're aware, like we don't shelter them from the whole world, but I'm like, I just want you to enjoy your childhood and
be
grow
a
up.
child.
Being a child and you don't need to deal with adult issues and with war and trauma and things that are going to make you be real challenges for you. I think that's one of our jobs as parents that we've got to play to.
I agree with that. Like just having that open conversation, with your kids and letting them know, you let them know the dangers that are out there, and you let them know the reasons why you're not allowing them to have access to such and such. I think that's really important. And I think for parents as well that are out there and they're thinking, but my kids are already exposed to that. So how do I help them? Because I think they know more than they should, and it's too late now.
How do you go back?
Yeah. What advice would you give?
Yeah, I think you've got to start, and having really good open conversations with your kids is really important, and telling your kids why. Like, we probably spend a lot of time explaining to our kids why we've made certain decisions and why we don't want them, even why we don't want you to have too much screen time. I often say to my kids, like, I can see that your head's getting scrambled, and then after you've spent hours and hours and hours on screens, you're angry and you're tense and and so we choose to be really open and transparent with our kids to try and help them understand that we're not just trying to be mean, but we're actually trying to look out for you, and we want the best for you, and we want you to grow up, healthy and whole. So I think, we need to be the parents. We are the parent, not the kids aren't our parents. So.
That's it. And I think for the young women listening or watching, I know there's a lot of pressure. You have to look like this. You can be an OnlyFans gal. You can have a sugar daddy. All these things is literally girls on YouTube selling, to other women that, this is the bright and glamorous career. So like, how can we support them to actually make them realize that that's temporary, what they're chasing or what they're being sold, it's only materialistic as well. But in the long run, you'll be left with a lot of trauma, a lot of, regrets as well. But, our bodies don't get younger, we get older, and it shows, it shows what life we've lived. So if you're being pressured to go into that industry or that career, just remember that you can work hard and do other things, normal jobs, to support yourself so that you don't end up being exploited, and then having to regret that as well.
I think when people hear about this issue, they think, well, what could one person do?
Yeah.
And really, I'd like to pose that to you. What do you think just one person could do to kind of combat this issue that we're facing today?
Well, I think we can all do something, and I think the worst thing in society is that you hear a message like this and then you choose to do nothing, and so many people get polarized. Well, I don't know what to do. Well, I'll give you a couple of examples what people can do. First and foremost, from a Destiny Rescue point of view, we would love to invite your listeners to help us rescue kids. On average, it costs us $1,800 to rescue a child. And people can go, well, I don't have $1,800. I'm like, no, but you could do something by joining. So we've got an army of what we call our rescue partners. And our rescue partners choose to rescue kids every single month in whatever amount possible. And because if we can join you with another supporter and another one, all of a sudden, collectively, we're doing a lot. And if I think about if all of your listeners today just chose to do something and you went, you know what, I could donate $50 a month or $20 a month or whatever it is, that we can join you all together, and that collectively you could actually be helping us rescue kids. I think then you've got, we can do fundraisers. We've got some incredible people that have signed up. We've got a program called Move to Rescue, and it's just encouraging people to do something. We've got this 61-year-old grandmother at the moment that is walking from Brisbane to Sydney to raise money for Destiny Rescue. And this is her fourth walk, I think. She's done a walk from Sydney to Melbourne. She's done the length of Tasmania, and this time she's doing that walk. We've got other guys that have done pull-up challenges, and so we've had a whole heap of CrossFit gyms across Australia that have done pull-up challenges to see how many pull-ups they can do. So you can do lots of different things, and if you jump on our website, destinyrescue.org, you will see a whole heap of ideas that you can do to raise funds. We've got other people that have run, movie screenings and encourage people to make a donation after that to help rescue a child. And then you can just raise awareness. We've got a whole heap of videos on our website that you can share onto your social media channels and encourage people not to be blinded by the issue. And, I think if your listeners wanted to go to our website, destinyrescue.org, and you can find a whole heap of resources there to help raise awareness and get this conversation into the mainstream. Because it's a tough conversation, but it's an important conversation. And the more people that are aware of this issue, the more we can actually change the world for kids right around the world.
And we will leave everything in the description and in the show notes, so we'll be able to easily find it. We're going to promote it across all our social media, and I'm actually going to host a screening and a gin night to help.
Can't wait.
Yeah, you're going to have to come and
absolutely
have a few. But
that's
thank you.
it. No, it's going to be exciting. And I know whether you're a runner, whether you're someone who donates or you just want to raise awareness, feel free to join the conversations as well. Comment down below our socials and let us know if there's anything that you'd want us to do in terms of like helping Destiny Rescue with this mission. But yeah, other than that, we really would like to thank you so much for taking your time and coming down and talking and educating us on what's happening with human trafficking. And we would like to also thank your team. You guys are doing really incredible job. We need more people like you guys, and it's such a privilege that you've come down and share this with us.
It's a true beacon of light and hope, really, and I think that's what your company is all about.
Well, thank you so much for having us. It's always a privilege to be invited to share some of what we're doing, because ultimately we know that there are a whole heap of kids tonight that are doing it tough, and that tonight will be forced to do things that no child should ever be forced to. And if we can stand in the gap for them, and if we can help them get free, that's what we want to be doing. So thank you for the opportunity to come and do that today. I really appreciate it.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.